I want to start, I'm going to ask you a couple things before I ask you. I would say on a lot of levels, this movie is about kind of failure to communicate, failure across generations, even when it comes to the story of the ghost. The whole fixation is based on a mistake. You know, and just curious about the relationships of where this came from for you, and having kind of grown up cross-culturally, and having to deal with that as well as a generational divide, and how much that informed this particular story.
Being that I am cross-cultural, I'm a mutt in many ways. I am Lao, but my father is what we call Lao Viet, meaning he was a Vietnamese man born in Lao, and we were immigrants. We came to America. My brother was 2 years old, and I was born there. And there's a weird hierarchy thing, things that I didn't understand as a child. Like, normal people could go, you know, normal children could speak to their parents, and we couldn't. We could not challenge our parents. And when I moved back to Lao, I observed this as well, because the internet filtration, modernization, and westernization is seeping into Lao, but we are not ready. In Lao, the families are certainly not ready. In fact, the government had a major problem with this film because Chanthaly herself talks back to her father. And they were really worried about how that would affect the new generation. They're like, oh, she's a really mouthy little bitch, you know? And they were worried about that. And so this film exemplifies a lot of that. There's definitely a modernization gap that's happening in our country right now that the people are not prepared for. And globalization has happened a little too fast for Lao, both development and globalization. And this film, I think, is one of the first to address that, actually. At this moment, we are still working on that. Our youth, our generation, in their 20s and in their teens, they're trying to live a modern-day life, but their parents are not used to having children, especially female children that are independent thinkers and that make decisions on their own, because technically we're a very patriarchal society. Your father makes your decisions for you, your grandfather makes your decisions for your father. So this is a very new subject for us, and we're still trying to cope with that in our country.
Now, when you returned home, or returned, I guess it wasn't even home, when you returned to your father's home, really, in a lot of ways. I mean, this is a country that has scarcely any kind of cinema history at all, scarcely any kind of infrastructure at all for this. You know, what made you believe that you could even do this?
I don't think I initially believed I could do this, honestly. My background as a filmmaker is not as a filmmaker. I was a makeup artist and a ballet dancer. And when I went to Lao, my husband was a screenwriter, and we went because my father went. My father was lonely. My mother passed away. He wanted to go back to the country of his origins. And when we went there, we ended up meeting the pioneering filmmaker of Lao. He was the one to make the first Lao film. And we decided, we can do this. Like, we can definitely do this. Lao needs to have stories that, Lao people need Lao cinema. Right now we're reliant on Thai cinema and even Korean cinema. And we have almost no stories of our own. I mean, this is the 9th Lao story that's existent on film, and nothing would really stop me. I mean, we still have some rickety old equipment. We have some rusty old archaic equipment, nothing like what we have now. I own my own camera. I have this shitty little Canon 550D, and I thought, it's not like America. If I want to make a film, nobody's stopping me. I mean, the Department of Cinema is supportive of us making Lao stories, and you know, I don't have any marketing department or any producer standing over me saying, no, we need a story about zombies because that's what's trendy right now. We need this. Literally, as long as I could afford to make a film, and as you can see, Nam Kong Beer financed my film, I could do whatever I wanted. I could do any kind of story I wanted, so, you know, why the fuck not?
Do we have questions from the audience? The right side is yeah, right up in the back.
How hard was it to cast these? I mean, these actors seemed top notch, and for a film without an infrastructure, or a country without a film infrastructure, like where'd you get these people?
That's a really funny question because we don't have actors. You're right, actually, you're right. We have no actors. We have a couple pop stars and etc. Actually, this it wasn't a controversy, but I do get addressed this a lot in my country because people ask, you know, how did you choose your actors, and why did no one know about the casting call? I had no open casting call. There are no agents or anything. Basically, that man that played the father is my boss. He's a producer of the film. He's my boss. And I convinced him to play the part. And we promised him that it would be a 2-day shoot for him, and it was supposed to be a bit part. But we kept writing him a longer role because he's just really amazing. And the young girl, Chanthaly, whose name is Newt, actually, her nickname, she was a one-hit wonder pop star. She had one album, and that was the end of it. And there was a reality TV show that I directed in Laos, and she was supposed to be my MC or hostess. And when we first found her, she had no experience in front of the camera. She was in like a really shitty music video before. And I tried to work with her. And in the beginning, it was a lot of turmoil. There was a lot of crying in the bathroom on her part. There was a lot of fighting. And eventually, something clicked in her. And I realized she was very talented to begin with. And something clicked in her, and she was like, this weird woman, this weird Lao woman with an American accent just wants me to be my best. And so she started to listen to me, which is a new thing. You know, she started to listen to me, and I decided when I was ready to make a film that she had to be my lead role. She had to be my protagonist. And so the role that you see here as Chanthaly is very much her. There's not much different from the real Newt. She is that mouthy and that eccentric. Actually, she's much more eccentric in real life. So we wrote the role to accommodate her as a character. And the majority of the characters that you see there are just people that I've encountered or people that I know well that were willing to kind of go on this ride with me, honestly.
Mr. Marsh.
You said that the beer company pretty much funded the whole film. How did you talk them into funding a film when that doesn't happen? And what were their guidelines? I mean, obviously they wanted the label.
The main guideline was drink lots of beer.
And we did.
Can you talk a little bit about how that deal was struck and what
It's kind of a positive and negative in Laos because we don't have a film infrastructure. There's no such thing as financing or people who invest in films, you know. Basically, the majority of my fellow colleagues they're just loaded. They go to mommy and daddy finances their film for them, you know. They're extremely wealthy, and so when they want to make a film, they already have 20 or 30 grand ready for them. And I was in a very different situation where I came and I had nothing. I didn't intend to make a film, and I decided I needed to make a film. And so I decided I was going to go look for, I wanted to have a different model of filmmaking, actually. I didn't want to be in debt. I wanted to, as soon as I sold my first ticket, to be in the black. And so I figured I could have advertising in the film. I mean, in America, that's very common. There's product placement, and et cetera. And I'm sure you guys noticed the Nam Kong beer product placement in there. It was not subtle. So I approached a few different companies, and one, they were shocked. They were just like, you want us to fund what? You know what I mean? Like, I'm the 9th film in the country. And 2, I was a lone female asking for these, I guess you could say, favors. And a lot of people just thought it was strange, but Nam Kong Beer, I was fortunate to have worked with them before, actually, for other projects, commercial projects. And so we had already had a relationship, and they drink a lot, so maybe they didn't really know what they were signing when they signed their contract. But basically, they just asked for some visibility. They asked for their product to be portrayed well, and they gave me the cash to make the film. And it wasn't really a lot to ask for, and because of that, I was very fortunate to have no debt. I think I'm actually the first Lao film to, as soon as we sold our first $2 ticket in Lao, to have no debt and to be in the black. So I had $2 of profit the first customer that entered the theater, honestly.
Now, I know the answer to this because we've talked about it, but can you explain what distribution in Laos looks like?
What it looks like, okay. Distribution, again, positive and negative. I am very fortunate to always have distribution in Laos. You know, in the West, in Europe, and in America, you make a film, and you're like, shit, I made a film, what do I do now? Oh my gosh, I'm gonna get on my hands and knees and beg for some sales agent to buy it, or some I don't know if I'll ever have a theatrical release. Like, I have a friend who did an animated feature for Shoreline, and you know, he had a straight-to-DVD release, and that was amazing already. But for me, basically, we have 2 theaters in Lao, and we're getting a 3rd one built. Yay! And sadly, they only show bootlegs at this theater. It's a 35mm theater, and they smuggle film prints from Udon Thani, which is Thailand, across the border. It's only like half an hour away. And some guy gets paid under the table for smuggling these film reels into Lao. And so they keep 100% of the profit. So they just seriously don't give a shit if I made a film and I want to play it. I drive a Blu-ray player over from Lao Art Media. I drive a projector over. And I bring my DVD, and I have one of our staff guard the equipment. He starts and stops the equipment every time, and I share 50% of the profit with 50% of the box office with the theater. And so it's pretty simple. Like, you make a film and you have instant distribution as long as you give a bottle of Johnny Walker to the guy and promise him 50% of the box office.
Yes.
What were your influences for the subject matter of the film?
That's actually interesting. It's a lot of different things. It's extremely personal. My mother passed away in 2005, and my father and I'm not saying that I am Chanthaly or that my father is that man, but actually one of the shocking things about my father watching this film was there were a lot of times where I sat there really nervous, like, does he remember when he said that? Like, a lot of the lines that the father says are quoted directly from my father, but a lot of it was inspired by the fact that my mother passed away and we were very lost. We didn't know how to handle that because it was very sudden. And also, to be obscure, it was very related to a ballet. Like I said, I was a ballet dancer before. And the original subject matter came from a ballet by Jules Perrault. It was called Giselle. And if you know about ballet, you can probably identify the characters, but I identify very well with this because my mother died suddenly, and I felt like I had no answers. And not that I was superstitious, but there were times where I wished that I had some kind of encounter. And my father was just kind of floating on his own, and he's extremely non-superstitious, so he was very lost at the time. And I always imagined that if this had happened when we were younger in my family, that we would be in a very similar situation, actually.
And there was actually a film version of Giselle that screened at the Toronto Film Festival this year.
There was.
Yeah, a director named Toa Fraser from New Zealand.
Was it any good?
Yeah, apparently it is.
I have a dog in
We're
my
just having a conversation.
So does a dog.
Yes.
Can you talk about the place of the dog in the Laotian society and how he worked into your film?
Oh my God, that is a really good question, actually, and I'm so glad you asked that because that is one of the, okay, my film is very authentically Lao. The food, the people, the way they treat each other, the way they talk to each other. It was actually even a little too authentic for the government because the government has a party line, and you know they like to portray their women as submissive and demure, and their men as authoritative. There is a Lao according to our party, and there's a Lao according to what is actually real. And the dog is the least authentic part of the film because no way in hell would a Lao girl like sleep with the dog in her bed. Like they do like their pets, but their pets, I mean, when you pet a dog in Lao, you do this. You take your fist and you kind of pat it on the back of the head because people are not holding and cuddling their dogs. They're considered like kind of lower base creatures. So Mango the dog, who played Moo in this film, was probably the least authentic bit of the film. But other than that, the film was 99.9% Lao, except for Moo the dog.
I would like to ask you a little bit about the supernatural content of the movie, because as was touched on ahead of time, I mean, Lao is still, it is a Marxist communist country, as is the case with all Marxist communist countries. They have a very strict belief or denial of any kind of afterlife. I mean, this is a core philosophical issue there. So I'm curious both in terms of how you got that through and in terms of what the actual on-the-ground beliefs of the people are in terms of the afterlife. And I mean, they have the temple in the house and all of that, so how those things line up or fail to.
That's actually really interesting, what the people actually believe versus what the party actually believes. The first time I even suggested that I wanted to make a ghost film, I got a flat-out rejection. It was just the Department of Cinema and the Ministry of Information and Culture just said, no, like, no fucking way. And I said, but why not? Like, we all believe in ghosts here in Laos. I mean, every house and every business and even every government building has one of these shrines in front of it, and they do ceremonies in front of it. No event happens without one of these ceremonies, burning of incense and giving of offerings. Even government events. So they obviously do believe in spirits. A very strange mix of Buddhism and animism together, actually. But because we are communists and Marxists, they did not want to promote the belief of spirits. So I got a really flat out, no, you can't make this film. So instead of being really miffed about it, a lot of my fellow filmmaker colleagues are very frustrated by censorship. I just, I came to the office of the Department of Cinema, again, armed with a bottle of Johnny Walker Black, and I said, so why can't I make this ghost film? Because I know you believe in ghosts and shrines, right? And they said, well, we're Marxists, and Marxists believe in an afterlife. So I offered the character of the father, and I said, well, what if I have a Marxist character? What if I have a character that doesn't believe in it? It's entertainment. One, it's a fiction film. Like, I really had to explain to them that it was a fiction film. I said, one, it's entertainment, it's not real. Two, the father is a party-line Marxist. And three, it's up to the audience to determine what actually happened in the film. Was it a hallucination? Was it actually a ghost? Like, what really happened? And so they kind of went, okay. And it's the first film of its kind. Before, we only had romantic comedies and propaganda films. We always have propaganda films every year, actually. Poor country girl falls in love with city boy, and it's a disaster because capitalism destroys her relationship. She goes back to the countryside and realizes that, like, chickens and scrambled eggs are the best thing ever. But so it was the first film of its kind, and so they were very supportive about trying to make it work. And so when I said, okay, I have a Marxist character and I have a traditional character, they were like, okay, but real belief. Everyone thought we were being haunted during the filming. That shrine that you guys see there had to be decommissioned. I hired monks to come because nobody would do any of the scenes with the shrine until I hired a bunch of monks to come and pray over it. We had a ceremony. I spent like $200, which was like maybe, it's a large percentage of my film budget actually, on the fruits and candies and incense that had to go with the decommissioning ceremony before anyone would actually be willing to come to my home. By the way, you guys have just seen my entire house. Chanthaly's room is my bedroom, and that's my house. Before anyone would be willing to make this film. So they're very superstitious in Laos, despite pretending to not be.
I believe we're out of time.
Sorry.
So we were going to wrap it up there, but we're going to move that way, and I'm sure you may have noticed she's rather friendly. I'm sure Manny would be happy to talk with you more outside.